My name is Jessica Chacon. I'm an assistant professor at Paulo Foster School of Medicine. I'm an immunologist by training, so I study the immune system, which is a hot topic this year, so I'm very excited. But I am also very passionate about giving back to my community because my hometown is El Paso. So we developed this health education group at Texas Tech back last summer when the pandemic really hit. And it's really student driven. So today you won't see myself presenting or any of the other faculty, but you'll see our medical students and our graduate students putting on a presentation about informing everybody about the COVID-19 vaccines. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass the virtual mic to our moderator for today, Ms. Sarah.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so happy to be here with Texas Tech once again. Thank you, Dr. Jessica Chacon, for agreeing and the team. Um, the EP Heat team, as I know, again, as Jessica was saying, is to give back to the community and give information to the community about COVID-19 and the vaccine. I would like to introduce a few people that are going to be presenting today. The first is Carlos Boucheau, and I got it right because I asked him right now. So Carlos is a third-year medical student there at the Paul L. Foster School of Medicine. He's 24. He's from Laredo, Texas, which is also a border town. He got his undergraduate degree from UT Austin, so that's really cool. Carlos, like most of us here, is bilingual, bicultural, and ready to help break down barriers to Hispanic Americans all over the US. So thank you for being here, Carlos. And I would like to introduce Kristen Helmsdorfer. She's a first year medical student as well, and she's part of the EP Heat team as well. She has a passion for education and literacy, and I love that because that's right up my alley. She was formerly a middle school English language arts teacher. English language arts teacher, that's kind of a tongue twister. And right now, she is participating in a retrospective study on COVID. So thank you, Kristen, for being here. Thank you for your time. And lastly, I would like to introduce Kaysha Bardwash. I got that right too, because I asked him. So as well, Keshav is a first-year medical student. He's originally from New Jersey, where he went to school at Rutgers University, and he attained a bachelor's degree from there in cell biology and neuroscience. That is crazy cool. And there's one more crazy cool fact about Keshav that I'll read in a little bit. He has a cool puppy. He's very passionate about public health and is currently getting an MPH and is part of the EP Heat team as well. He also serves at the Rhoda Care Clinic, which is a free clinic in El Paso for the uninsured. He serves there as a student director. And the fun fact is, he has a Weimaraner German Shepherd puppy. And I had to Google that, and they are so cute. I've never seen a puppy or a dog like that before. So he likes to go on hikes with his wife and roast coffee with his puppy. Super awesome. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, for being here.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for those introductions. And Kaysha, if you'll go ahead and share your screen. As Kaysha is pulling that up, we're so excited to be here. And the goal of today is to be curious and to stay curious. So we encourage you to ask and think about lots of questions at the end. If you put them in the chat, we would love to address them to the best of our ability. And also the model, each one, reach one, teach one. So if each of you today that's listening can reach out to one person and share one thing that you learned from today, then we can do lots of education here in our community. So I encourage you to follow that. And with that, we're excited to introduce our COVID vaccine trivia. And we thank our moderators, Dr. Chacon and Dr. De La Rosa. And how this is going to work is we are going to pose a question and then ask you to type in the chat true or false. And first, an important disclaimer that if you were to go back one slide, Keish, that We don't endorse or promote any proprietary products. This presentation does not constitute medical advice, and you should contact your physician regarding medical advice. And this presentation cannot be copied or reproduced without permission. So get the logistics out of the way. And so as I mentioned, true or false, these are questions that have been posed to us either by friends or family in the community. And so we hope to address them. And even if you think it's very obvious, we encourage you to still write an answer in the chat. So with that, Kaysha, the first question to practice and warm up is true or false, crocodiles live in the ocean? Excellent. I'm seeing some roll through. And the answer is false. So we've got some experts that are listening in today. Okay, so starting off with our real questions about today's topic about the vaccines. True or false, it is safer to get the virus than the vaccine? And the answer is false. And here's why. I want you guys to think about it like a coin toss. If I had a coin with me, I would toss it up in the air, but there's heads and there's tails. And let's pretend heads is getting the virus very, very badly or very seriously. And tails is that you have a very mild course. And that's 50-50. And so it's really scary and unpredictable to know how your specific body is going to react to the virus and if it could be life-threatening. However, on the other hand, we have the vaccine. When we say vaccine, we were going to refer to the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines because those are the ones that have been approved and out right now, even though there's some others that are in the works. And so those vaccines have been proven to show that they have 94.5% and 95% efficacy, which means that when you compare the people who got the vaccine in the trials to those who didn't in the placebo group, 95% of the time it was protective for them versus those that were in the placebo group. So the way I like to think about it is whether you are at 50%, which is an F, or 95%, which is closer to 100. So would you rather leave it to chance for you to get sick or for it to be effective for you to develop antibodies? And one last thing I'll mention is that studies have shown that people that get the virus, there's different levels of antibodies that their bodies make. So person A might make a few amount of antibodies and person B might make a ton. And that's really hard to predict as well. So even if you get the virus, it's hard to predict how many antibodies you're going to have and how long they're going to last. So we're going to talk about that later in the presentation. Okay, next question. True or false, the vaccines were made so quickly they cannot be safe? And the answer is false. And Kaysha, is there another slide with the picture on it? Thank you so much. So if I were to ask you to do a word hunt and tell me which word is the same in each one of these little boxes, what you would quickly notice is the word safety. So all vaccines have to go through a very rigorous process in order to be approved to be able to be put into your arm or wherever it's going to be injected. So as you notice, you start off with phase 1, which starts off with a few amount of people. And there's certain things that scientists are looking for in phase 1 versus phase 2 versus phase 3 specifically. And in the second phase, they increase that to about 100 to 300 participants. So it's like adding a 0 each time. 30, 300 to 3,000. And I know that Pfizer and Moderna have about 30,000 participants, up to 45,000. It varies depending on the clinical trials, but that's a lot of people. And also, this is one of the fastest, well, it is the fastest vaccine in history to ever have been made. And just because it's fast doesn't mean it's not safe. It still went through all of the same things that vaccines have to go through, except it was approved for emergency authorization use, which means like as soon as possible. And also the reason why that was effective is because of the teamwork around the world in Operation Warp Speed. And people have been working on these mRNA vaccine technologies really intensely, specifically over the last 10 years. And so we have scientists dedicating their lives to this research. And so when you have people able to come together, you can get the job done very quickly and very effectively. Next question. I need to see how other people react to the vaccine before I get it, before I take it. And the answer is true, sort of. So that's kind of the purpose of the clinical trials that we just talked about, is to see how people are going to react to the vaccine. And so that's important for us to be able to see before we can approve it for use in millions of people across the globe. And so, as you noticed, it started off with a few volunteers and increased. And I can just give you a personal anecdote, but I know for me personally, when I think about who I trust and when I get things from, obviously talking to trusted scientists and health professionals, but also seeing how other people react too can give you some confidence as well. And that's just because we're human nature. And so it's good to talk about if you know someone that's gotten it, just to see how they react. So you know when you get it, what you might be able to expect as well. Next question, true or false? The vaccine will turn me into a zombie. Dun, dun, dun. Yes, and I have personally heard this question, and the answer is false. And so if you guys look at this screenshot over here, this is actually a news story that circulated out on the internet where it says hospitals on lockdown as first COVID vaccine patients start eating other patients. And so it's really important as a consumer on the internet to be able to figure out where your resources are coming from as well, and to be able to pick that out. But we can assure you that that was absolutely fake. And also to come at this from a science perspective, if you want to tell people why this isn't true. But we're going to talk about this in just a second. But the vaccine cannot possibly alter your DNA. It is not humanly possible the way that it's designed by scientists. And so it can't even get into your system to be able to turn you into a zombie. But also another thing to prove to you is as of January 12th of this year, in 51 countries, over 40 million people have already gotten the vaccine. And so you'd think by now that if we were going to have a zombie army, that it would have already mounted and they would be roaming the globe right now and we would be able to warn other people. So we can assure you that with 40 million people that have already gotten, and this hasn't happened, this is not going to happen at all. Next question. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines will change my DNA. True or false? I kind of gave that one away, but go ahead and give us your answers anyways. False. Yes. Now we're going to walk through the science together. So Kaysha, if you can show the next slide. So if you can follow along with Kaysha's pointer, but the way that the virus, we'll show you how the vaccine works, but first we have to understand how the virus works. And so if you look at the virus in the top left corner, you see all those spikes, and that's why it's called the coronavirus, because it looks like a crown. And those spikes are what help it attach and enter into the cell. And once it's in our body and in our cells, then its RNA will use our host machinery to make different sort of proteins that will then be able to make new baby viruses that can go out and then infect other cells in our body. So if you focus on that spike protein, that is what the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are targeting specifically, is that they wanted to make instructions for our bodies how to build the spike protein so that we could build antibodies to that specifically. So next slide. And the way I like to think about this is, for those of you that are bilingual or speak a different language, is in our cells, we have, well, in our body, we have 30 trillion cells. And if you think about it, that's a lot of cells. Like if I had $30 trillion, I would be a really, really happy person. And each cell has to decide what type of cell it wants to be, whether it's going to be a cell in your stomach or part of your brain or your skin, your nails, etc. And the way that it does it is through the nucleus and the DNA in your nucleus. It's like the headquarters of your cell. And then the stuff around that in this picture, like the tannish section, that's called your cytoplasm. And so, as I mentioned before, it's like if you're someone who can speak English and then Spanish, English is like the DNA instructions. And then you give those instructions to someone who speaks Spanish, and they can translate that then to say someone who speaks Russian. So if you follow along the arrows, our cells follow this process from DNA to RNA to proteins. Again, DNA, RNA, proteins. And the vaccine is specifically an mRNA vaccine, which stands for messenger RNA. And again, those are just instructions for our cell. So the mRNA cannot go backwards to DNA. It can't translate from Spanish to English. It can only go from English to Spanish and forward that way. Now, there are things out there in the world that can alter our DNA, like too much sun or different types of chemicals and radiation, etc., or other viruses, even like HIV, but we're not talking about that here. We're talking about a vaccine, and a vaccine that can't possibly, one, enter the nucleus where your DNA is to change it, or two, even translate back into DNA. So we are safe with our DNA. True or false, the vaccine won't work since it has to be stored in such cold temperatures. And the answer is false. And the way I like to think about this is in terms of frozen vegetables. And if I were just to grab frozen vegetables out of my freezer right now and eat them, it would be really gross and really nasty, and it wouldn't really work for me, to be honest. So these vaccines, because they're mRNA, they have to be kept at these really, really cold temperatures. And there's really cold places on the earth that could naturally store these vaccines, so we actually have special freezers that can do that for us. But when you get the vaccine, it has to be thawed in order for it to work in your body. And so it's like using the cold frozen vegetables to transport it to you, which then it's unthawed so that it can be used and do its job properly. Okay, and Kaysha, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, sorry, I was muted. I feel like that's also another thing in every presentation, there's always someone's muting and talking. But okay, so true or false, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are safe. What do y'all think? Okay, so as a current data, because of what we explained with the clinical trials, in every phase, safety is the most important thing that's monitored. And so with current data, it's shown that it's safe. And not only is it safe, it's been shown that both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are extremely effective. I think Kristen talked about the Pfizer having a 95% effectiveness, and that the Moderna is at around a 94, which are both extremely similar in effectiveness. Okay, true or false? I have the vaccine, so I don't have to wear a mask. Okay. So for now, this is false. So there's a possibility that people can carry the virus as silent spreaders. And for that reason, masks are they protect against silent carriers. And also, the way I also like to think about this is that this study for both the vaccines, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, the effectiveness is shown in a population that actually used masks. So during the clinical trials, the people would social distance and they still wear masks. So the numbers that we get, while they are definitely from the vaccine, we're not really sure how effective they are without wearing masks. So that's also another reason for now why wearing a mask is extremely important even after getting the vaccine. Okay, true or false? Moderna and Pfizer's vaccines are similar. Okay, and this is for the most part, this is true. So they both utilize the same mechanism that we've been discussing about mRNA, and however, and they're both extremely effective. However, the dosing they both actually require 2 different shots for it to be effective, but the days in between each dose is different. So for the Pfizer's vaccine, you have to wait 21 days in between each dose. And then for Moderna's vaccine, you have to wait 28 days. So it's slightly longer for Moderna for it to be totally effective. Also, I know the Pfizer's vaccine requires a little bit colder storage temperature. The really extreme cold is with the Pfizer vaccine, and the Moderna is still extremely cold, but it's not as cold. But they're similar, but they're not the same. Okay, true or false? I got the first dose of Pfizer Moderna vaccine, so I don't need to get a second one. Okay, so this is false. I think it was like similar to what Kristen was talking about in the coin example. With the Pfizer's vaccine, when you first get your first dose, it's been shown that you have around a 52% immunity from COVID around 2 weeks after that first dose. And so what happens is your body needs to first recognize the thing that the coronavirus protein, and then after that, it needs to prepare for the next time. So I actually like to think about this like a pre-test and a post-test. So like pretend the test is exactly the same, and you have the option to take a pre-test and you have no idea what's going on the test. And when you take it, you might get like a 52%, like as in Pfizer's vaccine. However, that's still an F. You know, it might not be. It's still a fail. But when you get the same exact post-test and you get to see it again, you actually know the answers and you know what to expect. And so that is kind of similar to like that 95% effectiveness. And it's kind of one of the reasons why I like to see that you need 2 doses for this one. Okay, true or false? My child is less than 16 years old and they should get the COVID vaccine before going to school. What are your thoughts on this? Okay. So for now, this is false. And the reason for this is because I'm sure you've all heard of the phases of how the vaccine's been distributed. So there's different priorities for who is getting vaccinated. So first, it's healthcare workers and elderly that are 80 or 65 and older that are in a nursing home. And then they're going to move it out in different phases to like a teacher at different schools. This would probably be the next priority after that. And also children actually account for the lowest amount of hospitalizations while they do get affected. So that is the thought process for now as to why if we can vaccinate these really at-risk groups first, there'd be a lot of protection for the children. But they're actually currently, Pfizer is conducting clinical trials for kids over 12 years old. So we're going to need to see what the data hasn't been revealed for that yet. But it wouldn't surprise me in the future if this could be a thing that would happen. But for now, it's not true. True or false? I get really bad allergies. I should talk to my doctor before getting the vaccine. What are your thoughts on this? Okay, so this is partly true. It's only partly true because it affects those that have had a severe immediate allergic response to vaccinations in the past. So you might want to think about it if in the past you've had a flu shot and you had an extremely severe reaction. But those that have seasonal food or latex allergies are actually, they're recommended to take the vaccine still. I think what's getting the news right now is the really rare severe allergic reactions called anaphylaxis. And what's really cool now is that at every place where you get the vaccine, there's a team of a medical team that's actually monitoring you after they give you the dose. So you have to stay there and you get your dose and you wait for 15 minutes because they're observing you for any immediate severe anaphylactic shock, and they have the medication to treat that right on the spot. So there's really, and that the amount of that happening is actually very little. I did some research today actually on this, and so the case fatality rate, so on average in Texas right now, people that get COVID, it's around 1.55% of those people are dying from COVID. And then I looked up in December, those that actually got an anaphylactic reaction from this vaccine. And in the month of December, it was only, out of millions that were given, it was only 0.001% of those that actually got this severe reaction. And I also want to make it really clear that an allergic reaction is different from the side effects. You know, you might have felt, some of you might have felt like discomfort getting a flu shot before, like arm pain, or you just feel off afterwards. And that's actually a sign of a really robust immune response. And that's actually a good thing. And the way I kind of like to think about that is kind of like lifting weights at a gym. You know, it's not pleasant, and especially if you haven't done it in a while, that soreness you feel, but you know you're making your body stronger doing it. So I think it's really showing that you're having a good immune response. Okay, true or false? Individuals who are immunocompromised should avoid getting the vaccine. What are your thoughts? Okay, so for now, this is false. That's because it's actually shown that that people that are immunocompromised are actually the ones that are getting more severe effects from COVID. And so for that reason, it might be more necessary for them to get the vaccine. And also what can be confusing is that because the vaccine is not a live, it's not a live vaccine. So I know that you might have heard that for immunocompromised, they are generally not supposed to get live vaccines, because if they don't have a strong immune response, it actually can be very dangerous for them. But because this is actually an mRNA vaccine, the mechanism of it being able to be dangerous to those individuals it's not the same. So it's actually, this is false for now, as far as the data is concerned. True or false? I do not need to get the vaccine because I have tested positive for COVID-19 in the past. What do you think? Okay, so yeah, so this is false. I think you guys have heard that you do get, when you get an infection, you do actually get antibodies and a defense to that. But it's actually been shown, it's pretty variable, as Kristen mentioned, that people's antibodies to the virus are actually, it's very variable. Some people have antibodies for like 3 months, some of them have it for 6 months, where they're protected from another infection, and it's really hard to know, but I think that the average has been about 90 days, and they've actually shown that getting vaccinated it lasts, your protection lasts longer. So it's actually still really important to get vaccinated, even if you've gotten it before. Okay, true or false? I think this is the last one. The government is trying to microchip us with the vaccine. What are your thoughts on this? Could be the government, could be Bill Gates. I don't know. Okay, and this is false. So pharmaceutical companies did receive a lot of money from for funding from the federal government to speed up their vaccine development. But they actually, in terms of the storage, they got a lot of funding. But I know they did this independently and they tested it on their own. And also, when you think about a microchip, it's really small to go in the syringe. I mean, it's too large to go into the syringe. So there's really no way that I could see this being possible. And then I think this is some links to El Paso Heat. And then also, I also recommend the EP Strong website is also a really good site to just keep up to date with the COVID related stuff in the city.
Thank you guys so much for that. We have a lot of questions if you're ready for them. So let me minimize my screen and pull them up. Just 1 second. All right. So we have 3 questions from Sandra Ramirez. Would you like me to go one by one, or shall I ask them all?
One by one is probably easiest.
Okay. We also have like 6 other questions after that, so from other people. But the first one is, if you've already had COVID, at what point should you take the vaccine?
Well, I guess, and anyone can jump in from our team, but I think right now the hard part is actually going to get getting the vaccine, because we're rolling it out in phases, the 1A, the 1B, etc. So it depends on this person. If they're a younger and healthier person and they already had COVID, at what point? I mean, it'll just depend on when you're able to get the vaccine. But Dr. Chacon, if you want to jump in, or a member from our team, I think if it's someone who currently has COVID, like at this exact moment, and is eligible also for the vaccine and is like able to get the vaccine, then that's an excellent question. And I'm not sure I know that exact answer.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. So when you have the virus, your body is trying to protect you. So your immune cells have different types of weapons. So that's why we keep talking about these antibodies. These antibodies are one type of weapon that your immune cells, specifically your B cells, use to protect your body against viruses or bacteria. So when you have a person that's infected with the virus, even when they recover, they still contain these antibodies or these weapons that protect your immune system against the virus for anywhere from 3 months. Some antibodies have been detected in patients up to 5 months. So you want to make sure that your natural protection is okay first. And then once your immune system starts to decrease, because your immune system goes up when it needs it, but then starts to decrease, because if you have your immune system constantly being activated, that's not good either, because it puts you at risk for autoimmune disease where your own immune system is attacking itself. So what goes up comes down, just like your immune system. So what we're seeing now is after you've recovered from the COVID and after your natural immunity clears, so you no longer have these antibodies in your system, then that would be a good opportunity to get the vaccine, because then you can get that further boost of more antibodies in your system as well.
Cool, thank you. And not a question from Sandra, but you're talking about autoimmune diseases. So what if you already have one? Like if you have celiac disease, let's say for whatever reason, how does that work if your body's like already attacking itself, you know?
So I'm gonna open the floor to the students before I take it. Do any of the students want to chime in?
So I know my this is actually interesting. I know my wife's grandmother is actually, she has an autoimmune condition, and she's actually on anti lupus medications. And I know that her doctor recommended that when she does, so she's always basically the medications are um, bringing down your body's response to itself. And so you actually might lack that, you might have less of those immune defense cells because of the medication. And because of that, getting the vaccine, like, while it wouldn't hurt her, she might not get a good immune response to be protected unless she stops taking those medications for a little bit. So I know they actually recommended her before getting her vaccine to stop her medication for, I think, 5 days, and then after that to get the vaccine. But they also prescribed her a corticosteroid just in case she had a flare of because she's going to be stopping taking those medications. But I think Dr. Chacon might be able to answer that a little better than I did.
Yeah, I think you did a really great job, Kesh. And what we recommend is everybody's different, right? And everybody's immune system is different. So especially if you do have an autoimmune diseases, not all of them act the same. So we do highly recommend that if you do have an underlying medical condition or have an autoimmune disease before you get the vaccine, it's always recommended to talk with your physician, and that way you guys can plan together on the best approach to overcoming this pandemic.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Last question from Sandra. I'm actually gonna combine it with one of Crystal's questions because they're a little bit, they like add on each other. So how often do people need to get vaccinated? And also why, for example, we only need one polio vaccine, but that the antibodies from COVID go away. So how often should we get vaccinated for COVID, and why do we have to, like, why do those antibodies go away?
Well, I think I can answer the first question, but right now we're actually not entirely sure how often we're gonna have to get vaccinated. Current research suggests that, as some of my colleagues said, that the vaccine does increase your antibody amount, and they do last for longer, the antibodies than actually getting the disease. But we actually don't know, like, since the vaccines are so recent and they've just been developed this year, we're not exactly sure how long those antibodies are going to last. So maybe they're going to last 1 year, maybe a couple of years, or maybe they're going to last more. But right now we're just waiting and see exactly how long that's going to last. But current research, I think, is suggesting maybe once a year, or maybe every couple of years.
Alrighty. I'm gonna move on to Crystal's questions because they're kind of related. So Crystal's asking, why does coronavirus seem to have so many, I guess, effects, or not side effects, but why does it affect us so much? And on top of that, when it comes to the vaccine, should we worry about any long-term effects? And then she's saying, if it's an RNA, okay, I'm reading from the chat. If it's an RNA virus and has RNA viruses, Crystal, I'm so sorry. I'm not able to read the question correctly. Is corona a pro virus? Is the bottom line of that question.
So I can try to address why there's so many different effects, but I've been doing a lot of research into what we see as like this COVID brain fog, or there was an interesting article that came out about how on Amazon, the sales for scented candles went down because anosmia, or the loss of smell, is one of the major symptoms in COVID. So we know that COVID can have, like we've seen, these neurological effects and what are called these long haulers. And so there's different stages of the disease, and people can have lasting effects in their lungs as well that we've seen. And some people can get off scot-free and pretend like nothing has happened. But the way the virus, it can, like with those spike proteins and the way that it can infect our mucous membranes, which is basically like our nose and our mouth and our eyes, it can come in and it can enter like our lung cells, or it, like I said, it has neurological implications. And so that's a great question. And from what I've been reading, a lot of scientists are still puzzled as to why these like neurological effects are happening, and the mechanism is poorly understood at this point, and that's what they're trying to figure out. But that's an excellent question, and if anyone else wants to jump in on that.
Yeah, I think just in terms of the provirus, if I remember, I think provirus is the viruses that can integrate into human DNA. And so like there are some viruses that do that. I think like the HIV virus can do that. And honestly, I think like what everyone is saying is that there's still a lot to be learned about this virus that we don't know. And I don't, as of now, like it's a different type of virus than a lot of the viruses that do integrate into your DNA. So for that reason, I think a lot of people are skeptical that it could, but at the same time, I don't think we know yet for that.
All righty, thank you guys. Lastly, Crystal asks, why does protection with the vaccine last longer versus when you've had COVID and have those antibodies?
So I can take this one. So with the vaccine, you're trying to produce a very potent artificial immune response. So we'll just take with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. So I like, what I teach to my students is the first time you meet somebody, like the first time that I met the Yes You Can team, I'm not really sure what they look like. So it took me a while to recognize them. And then once I met Sarah and once I met Kristen, then I know what they look like. So that was just priming. So that's how the first vaccine works. It primes your immune system. So that way your immune cells are starting to see what the foreign invader is looking like. So then the second vaccine, the booster, it actually boosts your immune system faster. So then the second time that I met Sarah, I had already generated a memory of what she looked like. So the second time that I met her, it was faster and it was more specific. So I recognized her right away when she joined the Zoom call. I recognized her face and then added her to a panelist. So it's kind of very similar to that.
I really love how you guys are giving so many comparisons. It makes it really easy to understand. And I actually have a question to add to that. The different doses, so I know that booster shots exist for a variety, of shots or whatnot. But are these doses specific to the COVID vaccine, or are there other vaccines that are most effective when, like given in a series similar to the COVID vaccine?
Well, I know there are some vaccines that are like that, just like I think the MMR vaccine is also like that. I think you have to take it, you take it once and then you take it like 30 days later, and then you take it like 6 months later. And that is also just exactly like that, because every time you take it, you're priming your immune response to be able to recognize that virus or those sets of viruses. In the case of the MMR vaccine, it's 3 different viruses, a little bit faster, and just making sure that everything that you need to be able to fight those viruses, if in case you actually do encounter them in real life, they're ready to go as soon as you you encounter them. That's just one example. I don't know if there's any more that you guys know about.
Well, Sarah, you ask a great question because I kind of take that for granted. I used to work in a pediatrician's office, adolescent clinic, where we just had a chart of all the different vaccines, and we knew at age 11 you get a booster shot, and it was just very regimented. And I guess I've been doing so much research with the COVID vaccine specifically that I haven't done research into a lot of the other vaccines and how they were developed and how their dosing strategies were worked out. But yeah, I guess there's different types of vaccines, like there's killed vaccines and there's live vaccines. And so the mechanism of action is really going to affect how often it needs to be given. And so I think we could go through, take 5 different vaccines like polio, MMR, like Carlos said, and discuss each one individually and differently. But you're right, it is, has to be researched and go through the rigorous process again. And it is different for basically all of them.
That is really interesting. I'm like trying to formulate a response, but it's like not coming out into words. I'm just amazed at your explanation. Susie asks, and I know that you guys went over it a little bit, but maybe just to reiterate, what are the differences between the 2 vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna?
That's a great question. And I've been trying to tease apart the differences as well, besides like what Kaysha mentioned in the presentation, like the storage temperatures and the dosing. And I know that like the first wave, like my mom is a nurse, and so she received the Pfizer vaccine, and I'm going to be receiving the Moderna vaccine actually tomorrow. And so why, is that just a reflection of the timeline? But they were made by different companies, we can tell you that. And as Dr. Chacon told us, like if 2 representatives from those companies were sitting here and we told them that they were the same, then they would probably get very angry at us because they're designed by 2 different teams of scientists. But the way that they work is the exact same. If you guys hear on the news about like the Johnson & Johnson vaccines or the other vaccines around the world that are, DNA vaccines or have different vectors, then those are going to be wildly different. But the truth is, when it comes down to it, they are very, very, very similar, but we can't say that they're the same.
I like to think about it like when you go with your friends to do the painting. Even though you get the same picture to paint, they look similar, but everybody has their own take on it. So they look similar, but they're not the same.
I see. Again, with those comparisons, they're so awesome. Susie has one more question. However, because you guys are already talking about it, Brian wants to know, knowing that you guys have taken at least 1 dose of the vaccine, some of you, if you've experienced any symptoms.
Yeah, so I put in the chat, but I know I was a little worried when I went in, but honestly, I know there's like a couple. So there's the flu shot and the Tdap. The Tdap is the one that always makes my arm really sore. But for me personally, I didn't have any side effects to it. So I don't know, but I have heard that some people have felt some things, but it's definitely temporary. Everyone I've heard, it only lasts a few days. So if they do have something.
We'll have to include something like that in our future presentations, but there's an excellent chart that shows a percentage of the different side effects that people are getting, whether it's like chills or whether it's diarrhea or a headache or slight things like that. And so you can look that up online to see what people are experiencing according to the data. But anecdotally and personally, my mom got the Pfizer vaccine, and with the second dose, from what I've been hearing, the second dose has been eliciting that stronger response than the first one. And so she, like I said, she's a nurse, and so she did have those flu-like symptoms and had to kind of like take a day off work. But then she was a lot better the day after. It just kind of like knocked her out for a day, and then she was back at it. And I know some companies around the US are starting to like give days off work for people when they get the vaccine, which is a nice incentive as well, but that's just my personal experience.
Cool, thank you guys. Last question from Susie, and I think it's an important one. I don't know if you guys have insight to this, but if you do, awesome. Susie's wondering if underprivileged communities are being prioritized when it comes to, you know, the vaccine being given to the public.
I can answer this. So I was voluntold to be on a task force it's a COVID-19 Juarez El Paso task force. And I believe one of our attendees, Dr. Joaquin Cervantes, he's also on the task force. So Dr. Cervantes is a physician in Juarez and I work in El Paso, but every week I can tell you that during this meeting, we are troubleshooting ways to get vaccines to the El Paso County, but also troubleshooting ways to get it to Juarez as well. So it seems like it's taking a long time. I have not gotten my vaccine yet, and I've registered my parents. And I know it can be frustrating because we see all the time people getting it, and you're thinking, man, when is it going to be my turn? But I can tell you that there are people behind the scenes really trying to work together to get as many people vaccinated, especially the underrepresented communities and the those that need it the most. So that's my personal experience with that.
That's so nice to hear that there, you know, is an answer for Susie, because me and Susie are like always on the same page with like things need to happen. Yeah, and she's like, it's so amazing. It is amazing, Susie. I completely agree. So we have a final question from what I can see. And this one, I don't know if it's a little controversial. It might be. I have certainly heard things around where the vaccine supposedly affects your fertility in the long term or something like that. And Cassandra is not talking about fertility here, but she's saying that she doesn't really appreciate how, you know, some online sources exaggerate effects from the vaccine. She trusts her rheumatologist because she addressed to him, you know, unfair biases, and she asked what sources that she can rely on when it comes to talking about the effects of the vaccine. And just kind of the fear in social media is something I've certainly seen circulate. So I guess, yeah, my question personally is on the fertility aspect and what kind of sources can you trust, from Cassandra's perspective? What sources can you trust to talk about, you know, the effects of the vaccine?
Yeah, I can jump in on those questions. Those are great questions. Also, I just wanted to mention something to the last question is that a lot of different states are also evaluating the ways in which they're getting the information out about signing up for the vaccines. And so some of them have determined like sending a Facebook notification isn't reaching the elderly community if they're not on Facebook. And so do phone calls work better? Or do websites work better? And so there's a lot of data strategists that are analyzing that data and say, hey, we need to change up our strategy so that we can reach more people, and also bilingually. If the announcement's just in English and you only speak Spanish, they're looking at that as well. And a lot of brilliant people are on task forces for that. But in terms of the fertility question, I know that a very hot topic right now is, can pregnant women get the vaccine? And I know the question isn't related to if you're pregnant, can you get the vaccine? It's related to fertility. So it's slightly different. But like, for instance, my sister-in-law is currently pregnant, and a lot of the OBs, it's like a conversation that you have with your OB. And the fact is there isn't, 45,000, 30,000 people in a clinical trial that can say, well, we've had this many pregnant women or go through it and we can confirm, it's safe. So there is that, you have to make that decision for yourself. But at the same time, a lot of healthcare providers that are pregnant are getting the are choosing to get the vaccine for reasons we talked about, where it's, allowing your body to produce antibodies, and that was safer than if you were to get the vaccine, or get the virus, and then if your baby were to get the virus, et cetera. So, and then in regards to the second question about where to find your sources, I know that PubMed is an excellent source. I use PubMed all the time, and I'm guilty of just going to Google and typing in like like COVID, how long do antibodies last? Enter, and then look at the top, however many there are. And sometimes those are paid ads. So really, we always mention the CDC. I mean, you could read that website like 5 times and still get something new off it each time. So that's always a great place to start. PubMed or and I guess this is kind of your own opinion because every news source is going to be biased, but some people like the Wall Street Journal or New York Times just to get like a brief, you know, a news source, but anyone else can jump in. But those are the ones that I like to use are PubMed.
Cool. I think I'm going to be using PubMed. I feel like that's something I should have known, like a platform I should have known, but I didn't. So thank you for mentioning that. Okay, so I see that Carlos is addressing Brian's question of how long can you go without taking the second dose. Carlos, I don't know if you want to, unmute and talk a little bit about that, or I can just read your answer.
Oh yeah. Well, this is just something that I was reading earlier this week that the FDA does suggest that for Brian's question of how long can I go without taking my second dose if I can't take it exactly that day, the FDA does suggest that you take it as soon as as close to that date as possible. So maybe like a couple of days after that's okay. But since right now there's just so many people trying to get the vaccine and we're trying to roll it out as quickly as possible, we know that that may not be possible that day. So the current consensus is that you can take it up to 42 days after your first dose. So probably like about a month and a half.
Alrighty. Well, I don't think there's any more questions, unless if anybody has one last question that they want to put in the chat. We had so many really, really good questions. Thank you all for participating in the chat and, following along with us. Jasmine says that this was amazing. I completely agree. I feel really well informed, and I feel more comforted in just the decision-making process that I'm going to have to make when it comes to getting the vaccine. So I really do appreciate it. Let's see. Brian says, okay, this is a good one. How can I give a better understanding to my family that are very scared about the vaccine?
That's an excellent question. And I know that I have some family friends that are even nurses or extended friends that are considering not getting the vaccine, and most of them are. So everyone has their own decision to make, and so that is maybe you can take some tips from today, like how using these different analogies like the blind date or the pre-test, post-test, and kind of figuring out how to communicate with someone. If someone really likes data, then hit them with data and give them something that they're really able to understand. It's all about communication. The idea is, can you teach it to a third grader? And that's true for everybody, myself. In medical school, I'm like, can I teach this concept to a third grader? Otherwise, I don't understand it myself. And part of that is like using these sources to educate yourself. If there's someone that wants to pull on the emotional heartstrings, then maybe talk about someone that that's gotten it and be like, hey, look at so and so. But a lot of doctors go through training about how to talk about vaccines with their patients and how to encourage people to get the vaccine. So go with your gut and your family members and your friends the best, and try to get on their level, however that may be. But just know in the end, if you don't win, that's okay, because everyone's going to make their own decision, and ultimately that is their body and what they want to do.
Yeah, and well, to add to that, I'm sorry. I would suggest that people just talk about like real world analogies, just like we have been trying here. So for example, if somebody's skeptical about like the microchip question, for example, maybe you can say like, well, everything needs like energy, right? Like a battery or something to work, especially like a microchip or something. And you could just imagine with our phones, like we can only last like maybe like a day or two on a charge. Just imagine like if a battery that small that's going to fit into a syringe is probably going to last maybe like 5 seconds. So something like that is probably going to help people understand a little bit better and hopefully bring the fear down.
I really appreciate what Kaysha is saying here, is have more non-judgmental conversations. at least in my opinion, there are things that could seem arbitrary or non-arbitrary to different people, but if we take each other, seriously and have those non-judgmental conversations, then we're more likely to engage in something much more meaningful and something that we can actually, learn from. So I really, really love that. It's those like fundamental communication skills that always are so important, and again, that is super right up my alley, so I really appreciate that response, Kay. All right, well, we are past. Jessica, I don't know if you want to say any last remarks, but I would just like to thank everybody for being here. For reals, I've enjoyed my time here so much. Thank you, Kristen, Carlos, Kaysha, and Jessica. And Jessica, yeah, if you want to say any last remarks.
Yes, I just want to really thank you all for joining us today. This is something that we're all going into together. We're learning more about the vaccine every day. So I'm really glad that we developed a vaccine workshop to address any questions or concerns that our community has. And I'm really, really proud of our students working together to put on this workshop. And thank you, Sarah, for being our moderator. Thank you to the Yes She Can team and Dr. Golding for inviting us here today. We look forward to many more collaborations, and hopefully someday when we all overcome this pandemic, maybe a group dinner together. So thank you again for having us.
Absolutely. And I want to put EP Heat's website in the chat here, and I'm looking that up now so you guys can, see what they're doing. I think you guys have oh, you have workshop pamphlets. That's cool. You guys have a lot of stuff on here. Wow, I love that. So check out their website because they're doing some awesome stuff. I'm just like fangirling now, but thank you so much for being here, everybody, and have a really good evening.